Hello?
Oh, there you go. There. All right. Sorry for that technical delay. So again, thank you for the organizers for inviting me to come and both mentor and eventually judge you guys as well. I guess it's your turn to judge me. Yeah, I'm Geoferry. I'm a data science consultant at Deloitte, and I would just kind of a frequently asked question is just general kind of career advice that people come to me with. You know, how do I become a data scientist, and kind of what was your journey? And so I wanted to kind of encapsulate some of those kind of tidbits of advice in a little presentation for you. So first, I want to kind of give you an overview of my career journey so far, and then hopefully give you some non-Google insights. So I'm not going to be talking to you about how to write your resume or cover letter, because there's plenty of stuff like that online for you. Mostly it's about, as summarized there, become an orator of your industry. Basically use the language. If you want to search for a job at TD Bank, then use the language that TD Bank uses in their analytics. And position yourself accordingly. And then you will be a type 2 error for a while. I was and still am to a certain degree. But nevertheless, and this is actually an audience that probably understands what a type 2 error is, so yay. And then some additional potpourri that I'll just either blitz through or skip altogether. And just in case you're wondering, I will post this on the Slack channel so you can, as a PDF, so you can review it and click on the links that I have. So first of all, my journey in brief, started at the University of Waterloo, got applied math degree there. And then I went to the University of Utah and continued my studies both in applied math. Mostly I was focusing more on the biology and health sciences kind of applications of math. And then once grad school, if in reality grad school is more like a spaghetti bowl and eventually you get out, but for simplicity it's a line right there. When I finished, I was, of course, realizing that I need to get a real job soon. And how do I do that? And then, of course, there's a lot of literature about data science and how it's so popular and whatnot. But at the time, I didn't identify myself as a data scientist because I was just an applied mathematician. What is a data scientist? Then I realized over time it was almost like a rebranding of mathematician, statistician, and computer scientist. But now data scientist sounds sexy, so I'm like, okay, great, I'll just call myself a data scientist now. Along that journey, I realized, of course, there were some skills and knowledge that I needed to kind of round out in my own professional portfolio. And so I accepted a postdoc position at the Ontario Institute for Cancer Research, OICR, which is near the Mars building, actually in the Mars building. A wonderful place to be, wonderful people to work with, a lot of high quality talent there. And as part of that, I was using machine learning methods to improve the prognosis of cancer patients. So it rounded out more of my knowledge of machine learning and the more data science-y kinds of skill sets, as well as software engineering. The infrastructure there is absolutely incredible. They deal with like 2 petabytes of data, and you're always mining that. So I know we talk about big data, but the human genome is about 6 billion bases long, and you have to mine that, and that's just for one person. Now you need to multiply that by 200 people. And so the scientific challenges are quite immense there. And so the infrastructure and the people that kind of understand all that stuff is very impressive. So highly respected organization. And then some time thereafter, I wanted to search for jobs. And I realized perhaps a career in academia wasn't for me. Both in terms of the financial journey that would involve and the overall uncertainty of things. And so I started to look for careers outside of academia, and specifically at the startup community. Being at the Mars, you're so close to a lot of the startup world there. And so all the time there are like startup fairs going on, so there's a lot of literature, so I could always go there. Not really plan it ahead of time. I was just like, oh, there's a startup fair going on tonight. I call up my wife and say, I'll be home late. Okay. So that's how I learned about these startup things. And it was a great time for me to iterate quickly across various startups and kind of learn about them, see where I can fit in, see what kind of value add I could bring to them. Sometimes there was no value add, and so I moved on to the next one. But over time, I got to learn of the startup community. And Also, as part of that, as I was applying to jobs in the startup community, some startups were, I had some more formal interviews, but overall, some startups were like, cool resume, nice background, but I don't know if we have the content or the money to pay for you. And then I said, okay, so what about 2 weeks? How about we just talk about 2 weeks instead of 12 months? And they're like, okay, you realize this is not a full-time job. I said, that's okay, full-time, 2 weeks, yeah, that's great. And then so that kind of changed the conversation from, full-time position, you're too expensive kind of thing, to how about you just do some data science consulting for us on the side? Because I was also strategically trying to develop my industry knowledge, because just being in academia for so long, people were like, well, you only know academic things, you don't know real life things. I'm like, okay. So it was my opportunity to demonstrate that I can transition into industry on my own and actually get paid for it. And so on October 2015, I called myself Widgets and Digits. I actually thought of that name many years before, after playing EVE Online. If any of you play EVE Online, I made it my own corporation called Widgets and Digits, so I just mirrored that. But anywho, but that's when my first contract was signed. It was going to be kind of a, here's a bunch of models, choose the best model kind of thing, but it turned out to be, we don't have any data for you to actually do that kind of thing, so it turned out to be a strategy session. So a data science engagement without data is just a strategy session or a waste of money. So wanted to build the business, so it was a strategy session instead. And then about a month later, through people talking and whatnot, there's another contract that I signed as well, but that was more of an information management side of things. It was another startup company, medical oriented, and they eventually wanted to know, we have data, we want to know if something is positive or negative. And we are having challenges doing that. So I talked to them a little bit more, and it wasn't really a data science problem that they had, it was an information management problem. Their data was all over the place. There wasn't a database. Everything was manually curated, including file names, including columns, including important like public keys. And you don't want people to be messing around with that kind of information. So it was going to be a data science thing, but it was more of an information management thing. So I just went with the flow and helped them, again, come up with an information management strategy from that. And then rather, why does he have this on the slide here? Street Hockey, December 2015. At this time, I was kind of applying for jobs around April and stuff at some, corporations, actually through startups and the bigger corporations. And I was kind of at a low point there, and my son asked me if I wanted to play street hockey. I'm like, okay, sure, that's a lot better than lamenting my job search. And so I met him and his best buddy and his best buddy's family, and the father was there, and the father was taking an interest in me and asking me very specific questions, like, how do you manage client expectations? And normally people don't ask you that unless they're in consulting themselves. And so I answered his question, then I asked him, what do you do? And he said, well, I'm a partner at Deloitte. So I panicked and looked at the LinkedIn, I realized, oh yes, you are. I realized that that 3-hour street hockey event was really my character interview for Deloitte. And next morning at 7:30, I was referred to a position in there, and signed another contract in January, and then went through the Deloitte HR machine, and then eventually started at Deloitte. So my journey is kind of a lot of preparation, the whole grad school spaghetti bowl stuff, simplified, and then kind of a gradual repositioning myself as a data scientist in industry, and then a little bit of street hockey opportunity luck that kind of comes up. And it's always nice, well, hey Jeff, let's play street hockey together. I'm like, it's not going to work that easily. So that's kind of my journey. Within that journey, I want to distill it down to 3 important points here. The first is to become an orator of your industry. If people are hiring a data scientist, you have to talk data science, but you have to talk data science to data scientists, to information management people, to business executives, to anyone across the board. So whenever they're interviewing you, what is their background? And you have to use the language that they understand in that process. So you position yourself with the language you use on your resume and cover letter. And I find corp speak hilarious, especially coming from such a rigorous academic environment and how business people talk about analytics, but I realize that's the language that they use, so I have to use that language as well and understand it. And overall, they're more likely to hire you if you look and sound a lot like them. This is not Deloitte approved clothing, by the way, just to be clarified on that one. Anyway, so for an example, what do you do? As a researcher, I would say, as kind of at the beginning of this talk, that I'm a bioinformatician that uses machine learning methodologies to identify novel cancer biomarkers to improve the prognosis of cancer patients. If I went to the city of Toronto and said, hey, do you have a job for me? She'd probably say, you know, sounds cool, but what's in it for me? Because none of that language really resonates with City of Toronto business needs. And okay, you know cancer stuff, but do you know about City of Toronto needs? As a consultant, when I talked to startup companies, I said that I was a data scientist. I provided startup companies with data science, thought leadership, and technical expertise to drive product development and customer engagement. Product development and customer engagement are two key areas in startups. Those are the things that they need people to do. And so if you can bring that, view that through a data science lens, then they understand that. So I never went to a startup company saying I'm a bioinformatician. I always told them I was a data scientist. And then at Deloitte, it's a lot more wordy, but essentially I identify the industries that I'm in, saying that I have some expertise in that, and then I answer business questions using advanced analytics. So I don't even talk about machine learning or anything like that. I'm a data scientist, I know your industry, I use advanced analytics, what it boils down to. So, and again, these are the kinds of conversations as I was applying for jobs that I would have year or in the same day even. So depending on who I was talking to as a Deloitte person or as a consultant or as a researcher or whatever, this is the type of how I would change my language to fit the audience that I was talking to. And this helps you position yourself. Ideally, organizations want you to have everything that they're looking for. Reality is you don't. And so when you talk to, when you write your cover letter and over your interview, you're going to have strengths. You know, if they're looking for a software engineer, then, and if you're a master's degree, software engineering, that's an easy sell. So you just explain it. You don't need to, labor on it or anything like that. You're happy to know I've never had a numeracy test over an interview, so I was glad that didn't happen. Transferable skills. Those are the things that, okay, your background is potentially, relates to my business needs, and now you need to, as the candidate, sell that. So if you've never managed a team, but in my case, I taught classes and throughout university and college, that's an example of mentoring and leadership and managing, even though it's not the traditional, I'm a manager at TD and I have a data science team. It's nevertheless, you're kind of managing expectations in a class and teaching and whatnot. So those are the kinds of skills that you have to sell. Make those a strength. And then there's going to be weaknesses, so pivot on those things. So a great example that this audience will understand, at the OICR, we didn't use Hadoop or Spark or anything like that. But nevertheless, I was taking a course at Ryerson to broaden my skill set along those lines. And so when inevitably people would say, do you have any Hadoop experience? I would say, no, we don't, but we can't use that in cancer research. And they'd be like, what? I thought that was a standard big data thing. And I'm like, no, with cancer research, you need to have a complete knowledge of the whole genome to do your alignments. And what Hadoop does in MapReduce is it breaks things into smaller pieces, aggregates them, and then basically filters them and does the whole MapReduce thing. And you can't do that in cancer genomics. And so that's why we don't use that technology for a particular use. So that answer was a lot better than just saying no right off the bat. I said, no, I understand what Hadoop is. I understand how it compares to my technologies that I use. I understand the industry, i.e. bioinformatics, reasons why I can't use that technology here. But I understand it, and I'm taking a course at Ryerson to expand my skill sets. And so that was an example of kind of pivoting on a weakness. I didn't have that skill set, and so I still nevertheless demonstrate that I'm familiar with it, and that I am addressing that via my own professional growth by taking courses. And that's what you gotta kind of do there as well. And so being a type 2 error, it's important to understand how employers and headhunters, which I don't really like headhunters that much, especially when you're searching for a job, how they mitigate their hiring risks. And this is where you be a type 2 error. Ideally, organizations, when they're wanting to hire someone, they want to identify strong people who are perceived strong. And they also want to, if you're perceived weak and you're a weak candidate, that's great. True positive, true negatives. And everyone across the board doesn't want to perceive you as strong when in reality you're weak. And so that leaves you potentially as a strong candidate who's perceived weak. And I found a lot of the time that I had a lot of strengths to offer, but the hiring managers were trying to mitigate, mitigate their hiring risk by potentially identifying me as a weak candidate because I didn't have Hadoop, for example. But I had a bunch of other languages and other demonstratable skills to say, I can pick up on new technologies fast and easily. But still, that didn't matter. I didn't have Hadoop on my resume, so goodbye. And that frustrated me to no end, but nevertheless, being a type 2 error. So the way you kind of mitigate that yourself as a job applicant is you strategically use acronyms and buzzwords on your resume, cover letter, to help you position yourself for that particular job. Again, those are words that you use from their website, from the job application itself, or the job description rather. But you can't sound artificial. You can't just list all the 100 million technologies that you know, because that doesn't matter. Use headhunters when you don't need a job. I could prepare like 5 more slides on my experiences with headhunters, but the end conclusion is use headhunters when you don't need a job. And then when you're hired, you might be hired at a lower level than what you want to. If that's the case, then you will have time to address your gaps and advance quickly, because if you're a high shooter, then you'll be able to advance quickly anyway, even if you're brought in at the kind of lower end of things. So I'm a little bit over on my time, but basically there's some potpourri that I have at the end of the slides here, but again, I won't go into. You can visually skim it real fast, and then here's another slide for you. Overall, give yourself permission, those interviewing you, permission to kind of screw up, because it will happen. And overall, thank you again.
That's really great. Thanks so much. Are there any other questions for Jeff?
I just had one quick question.
Yes.
The course you were mentioned in regards to, I think, was a genome analysis.
Yeah, at the OICR or
Ryerson?
Ryerson. Oh yeah, Ryerson was the Big Data Technologies course.
Okay.
I think it's CIND 716 or something. So yeah, it's the course I took.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess all the knowledge for the genome stuff was done at the C.
At the OICR, yeah, and other research I did in the past is my PhD stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyone else? Questions? Thoughts?
All right.
Okay.
There we go.
So,
Sorry, just a quick follow-up.
Sure.
If someone wanted to do reading on their own time, like a little bit of research
Mm-hmm.
on genome, ONCR, is there like maybe a starting point you could?
There are some like MOOCs and other online courses and stuff. It depends on the how and where you want to kind of fit into that, and where your skills align with that. So if you're like just like a software engineer, then there's a lot of software engineers basically enable that research a lot. So we talk about version control and code review and things like that. That's kind of the underlying thing that we use to do our research. But if you want to be more specialized in, what are the epigenetic roles in cancer and causes of cancer, and then you need to really specialize in a kind of an academic sense in epigenetic factors and know what the heck that means. And so sometimes there are courses that give you a general overview of things, but if the more academic you want to get, the more academic you need to be in terms of your formal education, reading research articles and things like that. But there are ways, if you just want to work, say, at the OICR as a software engineer or developer or something, there are tons of jobs that are open already at the OICR, and you can contribute to cancer research without having to worry about cross-training yourself into something that's super technical and academic. Yeah. Yes?
So thank you for your talk. It was really helpful. So my question is, do you have any advice for how, if you want to transition into industry, how do you go about learning the business methods?
So LinkedIn was a great source of language and the noisemakers on there. Following Google, following Vincent Granville and a bunch of other people on LinkedIn. Because as business leaders, if you view their LinkedIn stuff, they will follow those people as well. So learning their language, adopting their language in your own positioning is important. And also, depending on your individual skill sets, you need to kind of map where you fit at the ideal job, say where you want to be. And it might require maybe 1 or 2 hops before you actually get to point B. So if you're, again, like strong in the software engineering, then maybe you want to, maybe there's some positions open as in like back-end architecture. And so jumping into the back-end architecture and then another leap into more the analytics kind of focus. So you kind of see where your skills overlap with your ideal job, and then see how you can kind of get there either directly or indirectly. So yeah, and we can, if you want, we can talk more detailed about that that kind of stuff. But in essence, that vague advice is what the end message is. Yeah. All right. Anything else? All right. Thank you again.
Thanks.